Welcome back. Wednesday edition of Global News Morning. Well, the Nova Scotia NDP is calling on the Houston government to cut the grocery tax and help families afford food now. At a press conference on Tuesday, they stated the average family is expected to spend $16,000 on groceries this year. Food price increases are predicted to rise between 5% and 7% in 2023, following a record-setting year in 2022 when the cost increases of groceries actually outpaced record-breaking inflation, going up by over 10%. So the leader of the Nova Scotia NDP party, Claudia Chender, was at that press conference on Tuesday and is here to talk more about this this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So why now for this initiative on trying to get the government to cut the grocery tax?
Well, because we know how challenging it is for families and seniors and people across this province to just afford the basics. And that's been going on for a long time, but it's been in the news a lot. The price of food is really outpacing the price of inflation. And so families are going to the grocery store and scrimping every dollar and shopping around at different stores. And there are a number of things that people are purchasing to eat and feed their families that trigger tax.
And a lot of Nova Scotians don't know about this because we're showing some of these
right.
images here of the Cut the Grocery Tax campaign you launched yesterday.
Yep.
For example, whole pineapple not taxed, but the prepared pineapple has a tax on it.
That's right.
Which, if you're watching at home and you say, okay, Claudia, I can buy a pineapple and I can cut it up and I can not pay the tax. So
sure.
what's the
I mean,
defense on
most of
that?
us, some of us can, but like we were talking about this exact example with someone that I work with who lives alone, and she said, I would never buy a whole pineapple. I can't eat the whole thing.
Right.
I would buy a portion of that for myself. Or, you know, and we were talking before the show, if you don't have transportation, or if you're a senior, or if you live by yourself, you're not always going to buy that larger portion. But also, you know, we are all pressed for time. Like time and money are our biggest commodities and the one in the shortest supply. So for families, for busy families, like we were talking, you know, rotisserie chicken, that's an item that's taxed. That's something I would pick up for my family if I'm stuck on Global News talking to Paul Brothers, don't have time to prep my food, you know.
Right.
And like you say, people don't know that it's taxed, but what people know are that the grocery bills are just punishing these days. And we want to make sure that Nova Scotians can feed their families and can make the choices they need to do that. And this is something that the government could do. It's simple. We already cut the PST, like the provincial portion of the tax on a number of items, like menstrual products and diapers. So we think the government needs to do it on all food.
So the government has responded to this in the media, saying that Nova Scotians don't pay tax on basic groceries, meat, fish, bread, eggs, fruit, vegetables, dairy products, but they are keeping a close eye on the impact of inflation. And spokesperson Stephen Stewart, Finance Department, says we've been providing targeted supports to families to help with the cost of living, including making it easier to access local food. So that was their response to
Yeah, well, what we know is that the budget for farmers markets of Nova Scotia is lower this year than it was last year.
Okay.
And that has directly impacted their food voucher program. So local food is actually pretty hard to come by. But, you know, the targeted response line is, you know, yes, the government has done some things, but it's just not enough. I mean, if we, every day I talk to people across this province, and what they want to talk about is how hard it is to afford to live right now, and particularly to afford food. This is a government committed to fixing healthcare. You know, being healthy means having enough to eat before you even get to family doctors or emergency rooms or the other things that we've talked about in the past. And so this is a really simple way that this government could help Nova Scotians afford food. And we think that should be a priority.
Are other provinces doing this, and how does this kind of look under your proposal on how it works?
Yeah, so BC does it. They don't tax any food. And Ontario does a version of it, so I think they refund the tax on items under $4. As you said, basic groceries, what's classified as basic groceries aren't taxed. So those, you know, eggs, milk, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But the reality is smaller convenience foods are, but also some arbitrary stuff like we talked about, a cooked chicken versus a whole chicken, a small serving of yogurt versus a big serving of yogurt.
Prepared salad versus having to buy it all and make it yourself.
That's right. And these are things that we might be buying for lunch, that we might be buying for supper, that, you know, as I said before, that seniors might be relying on. And we also know we have food deserts in Nova Scotia. We have places that don't have grocery stores, so people might be picking this stuff up at a smaller store or a convenience store. So, we already have the mechanism to do it. As I said, retailers have this capacity anyway because there are items where the provincial portion of the tax is rebated. And the main thing is that when people go to the grocery store, they should be able to afford to feed their families. And so that's what we are trying to help do here.
I've only got 30 seconds left, but you mentioned time. I mean, most families are buying pre-prepared food if they can afford it now because their kids are home from school. What's the latest on the strike here?
Well, the latest on the strike is that the government is refusing to come to the table. And we have a number of workers who don't make a living wage in Halifax, who can't feed their own families, speaking of feeding families, and a number of children who are being denied access to education. So it's really a terrible situation, and we are very clearly saying to the government, come back to the bargaining table, make this right, make sure these kids get back in school before the school year's over, and that these educational professionals are allowed to do their jobs.
Yeah, a lot of families are speaking out, of course,
That's right.
you know, not only those with special needs, but those in pre-primary too, as time is of the essence right now.
It is, yeah.
Right. Well, thanks for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, Claudia Chenda right there. She's the leader of the Nova Scotia NDP party. Cut the grocery tax. What do you think about that one?